What happens when a 94-year-old Hollywood legend steps into a courtroom to fight a powerful real estate corporation? All by himself? Clint Eastwood has spent his life fighting for justice on screen, but when his own land was illegally taken, he took that fight into the real world. Clint didn't just reclaim his land, he exposed the corruption of a multi-million-dollar company. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and justice. Let's dive into the incredible courtroom battle of Clint Eastwood, the real-life cowboy who proves that the fight for justice never gets old. The morning air in Carmel by the Sea was crisp, tinged with the scent of the Pacific. A thin mist curled around the wooden fence posts of Clint Eastwood's ranch. Standing motionless on his porch with a steaming cup of coffee in his hands, Clint's sharp eyes scanned the horizon. This land had been his for decades, not just property, but part of his soul. The rugged hills, the whisper of the coastal wind, the earth beneath his boots, everything held memories of his life's work. At 94, most men would have faded into the background. But Clint wasn't most men. He had spent his life defying expectations and proving that strength wasn't measured in years, but in resolve. Madsen Development Corporation had crossed the line. They'd ignored his warnings, dismissed his legal notices, and started building on his land. Maybe they thought he wouldn't notice. Maybe they thought he was too old to fight back. They were wrong. Clint exhaled slowly, the cool morning air visible in his breath. Setting his mug down, his fingers brushed the worn wood of the porch. Solid, unyielding, like him. Enough talk, enough warnings. It was time for action. Clint grabbed his truck keys and strode down the steps. His boots met the earth with deliberate steps. Madsen had started this fight. Now, he was going to finish it. The Monterey County Courthouse stood like a relic of justice, its stone facade worn by time. The morning sun cast long shadows as Clint Eastwood approached, his gait steady, unwavering. The heavy wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open. A hush fell over the room. The sound of his cowboy boots against the marble floor cut through the murmurs of attorneys and reporters. Heads turned, conversations stopped. It wasn't every day that a Hollywood legend walked into a courtroom, alone, without a lawyer, ready for battle. Clint was dressed simply. Dark jeans, a weathered leather jacket, a crisp shirt. No designer suits, no polished power ties. He wasn't here to put on a show. He was here to win. Whispers spread through the gallery. Is that really Clint Eastwood? Why is he here? Wait, he's representing himself. Judge Wallace Bridger, a man used to controlling the courtroom, adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. His voice carried a trace of amusement, as if he already knew the outcome. Mr. Eastwood, he said, are you sure you want to represent yourself? This is a courtroom, not a movie set. The room erupted in laughter, low chuckles from the lawyers, snickers from the jury. The mood was dismissive, almost mocking. On the opposite side, Gerald Parker, lead counsel for Madsen Development, folded his hands and smirked. A seasoned lawyer who tore through opponents with ease, he couldn't help but laugh at the sight of an old actor thinking he could win a legal battle. Mr. Eastwood, with all due respect, legal battles aren't like Western shootouts, Parker said, his tone oozing confidence. You should reconsider. The laughter continued, but Clint Eastwood didn't flinch. He locked eyes with Parker, his gaze as sharp as a rifle scope. No smirk, no retort, just a look, steady, calculating. A look that said everything. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Then, without a word, Clint turned, moved to his seat, and placed a thick leather folder on the table. His movements deliberate, measured. He opened it, revealing a neat stack of documents. A single motion, a single statement. Let's get started. Parker, brimming with confidence, took the floor first. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a simple property misunderstanding. Madsen Development legally acquired this land, and Mr. Eastwood, while passionate, has his facts wrong. He gestured toward the jury, flashing a well-rehearsed smile. We have all the proper documentation proving this development was conducted within legal parameters. Then it was Eastwood's turn. Slowly, deliberately, he stood and walked to the judge's bench, carrying his leather-bound folder. "Your Honor," he began, voice slow, gravelly yet commanding. "Before we take Mr. Parker's word for it, I'd like to present my own evidence." He opened the folder and one by one laid out documents, official land ownership papers, proving he had never sold or transferred his property. High-resolution satellite images showing Madsen's construction had extended onto his land. Copies of ignored legal notices, where Clint had repeatedly warned Madsen about their encroachment, only to be dismissed. The once amused expressions in the courtroom began to shift. The whispers stopped. The air grew heavier. Parker, still trying to hold his ground, cleared his throat, his voice now wavering. "Your Honor, with all due respect, Mr. Eastwood is not a lawyer. He may have misunderstood." Bang! The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom slammed open, sending a sharp echo through the room. Heads snapped toward the entrance. A man stepped in, Daniel Ali, a former construction foreman for Madsen Development. His broad shoulders were stiff, and his fists clenched at his sides. Tension radiated from him as his eyes locked onto Clint Eastwood. Recognition flashed across Parker's face, followed by a flicker of fear. Clint didn't look fully at the newcomer. He just gave a slight nod in acknowledgement before turning back to the judge. "Your Honor," Clint's voice, slow and deliberate, cut through the silence. "I have a witness." A murmur ran through the gallery. Reporters leaned forward. The once relaxed Judge Bridger straightened in his chair. Daniel approached the stand, his boots scraping against the polished floor. He sat down, gripped the edge of the witness box, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "I worked on this project," he began, "and I have something you need to see." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. The moment it was plugged into the court's display, the screen flickered. 2 blueprints appeared side by side. On the left, the approved plans. On the right, a version showing the construction extending onto Clint Eastwood's land. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then, a series of internal emails filled the screen. The words were damning. "Boundary warnings? Ignore them. Proceed with expansion. Legal threats are empty. Just keep building. Eastwood's old. He won't fight this. Proceed as planned." The final line hit like a gunshot. A gasp rippled through the gallery. A reporter dropped his pen. One juror shook their head in disbelief. Judge Bridger leaned forward, his once amused expression now replaced with sharp scrutiny. His fingers were steepled as he watched the screen. On the other side of the room, Parker's face drained of color. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles turning white. For the first time, Parker looked afraid. Parker's hands trembled slightly as they rested on the polished wooden table. The once confident attorney now found himself staring at a pile of useless papers. His voice cracked, no longer carrying the authority it once had. "Your Honor, we request more time to verify the authenticity of this evidence." But before he could finish, Judge Bridger's hand shot up, cutting him off like a wall slamming down. "Mr. Parker," the judge's voice was sharp, "are you saying your client had no knowledge of these illegal actions, even though the CEO of Madsen personally signed directives to encroach on Mr. Eastwood's land?" A sheen of sweat appeared on Parker's forehead. His collar felt tight. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He was out of options. The truth was out. Fraudulent blueprints, incriminating emails. Every piece of evidence exposed Madsen's illegal land grab and their arrogance in assuming Clint would never fight back. Clint Eastwood leaned back in his chair, fingers loosely interlocked, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his lips. His sharp eyes locked onto Parker, cutting through the tension. "Still think this is just a misunderstanding?" The room fell silent. No whispers, no murmurs. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, it wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was justice finally speaking out after being silenced for far too long. The sharp crack of Judge Bridger's gavel echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, sending a visible jolt through Madsen's executives. The once smug attorneys stiffened, exchanging nervous glances. Their confidence crumbled. Judge Bridger's voice rang out, clear and unyielding. The court finds Madsen Development Corporation guilty of illegal land encroachment and fraudulent activity. Silence. The words landed like a final nail in Madsen's coffin. No appeal, no loopholes, no last-minute deals. Reporters scribbled furiously. One jury member exhaled sharply, as if holding their breath the entire trial. The ruling was swift, brutal, inescapable. Madsen must pay full restitution, covering damages, legal fees, and restoring the land to its original state. All construction must cease immediately. Across the room, Gerald Parker sat frozen, his fists clenched, his once confident expression replaced with stunned disbelief. A bead of sweat trickled down his forehead. Clint Eastwood, however, remained motionless. No fist pump, no victorious smirk. Just a single slow nod, not of triumph but of acknowledgement, as if justice had simply done what it was always meant to do. With calm hands, Clint gathered his documents, stacking them neatly, as if this moment had been inevitable. He didn't look at Parker. He didn't glance at the shattered Madsen executives. He rose, turned, and walked toward the doors. The rhythmic tap of his boots against the polished floor was the only sound in the courtroom, and with that, Clint Eastwood had reclaimed what was rightfully his. Back in Carmel by the Sea, Clint Eastwood stood alone at the edge of his land, the setting sun casting long shadows over the rolling hills. Beneath his boots, the earth felt solid, unchanged, unbroken. This wasn't just land. This was home. Every inch of it held a story, the first fence post he'd driven into the ground decades ago, the oak tree where he'd once memorized his first directing notes, the winding trail to his favorite thinking spot. Now, it was his again, untouched, unstolen. Behind him, the soft crunch of gravel broke the silence. Judge Bridger stood a few yards away, his usual authority replaced by something more human, respect. "I misjudged you, Clint," the judge said quietly, hands clasped. "You reminded me that justice isn't about knowing the most laws. It's about having the spine to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds." Clint didn't respond immediately, letting the words hang in the air. With a small tip of his hat, he replied, "Guess you learned something today, Judge." Bridger gave a slow nod, then turned and walked back toward his car, his footsteps fading into the distance. Clint didn't watch him go. Instead, his gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the last light of day melted into the sky. It was a reminder, even after all these years, some things are worth fighting for. This story is proof that justice has no age limit, as long as you have the courage to stand up and fight for what's right. True strength isn't measured by years, but by the determination to never back down, no matter the odds. Clint Eastwood didn't just reclaim his land. He proved that resilience, integrity, and the will to fight can outlast even the most powerful opponents. His story is a reminder that doing the right thing is never about convenience. It's about courage. If you believe in standing your ground, in fighting for what's right, and in the power of justice, like, share, and subscribe to spread the Clint Eastwood spirit to the world.